Neglectful dad and evil stepmom tried to kick me out of my own house to give it to my spoiled, pregnant stepsister because her boyfriend left her and she is struggling. I, Mike, am 34, have a miserly, self-centered, and usually absent dad, John, am 62, who recently found out how much I'll earn. Shockingly, he's decided to kick me out of my own house, all in the name of family. Ashley, F29, my stepsister and daddy's little gem who can do no wrong, has magically gotten pregnant. Given her very independent goals of being an escort and an online model, she has trouble securing a place to stay. Now, dad wants to fix everything, and I'm the fix, unfortunately. I have to give up my house and my hard-earned cash to this woman because she made all the wrong choices. Now, I'm the guy my dad openly rejected as a responsibility multiple times. But ever since he found out about my new house, job, and surprisingly, income as well, he's gotten very touchy about us being the same blood. While I'm not thrilled about him frequently reminding me who my father is, he's also aiming to strengthen the bonds I have with his wife and her daughter. Granted, she's my dad's kid too, but I was cast away far too early to make any kind of connection with the woman. Glad I didn't, because I'd be so disappointed. Before you all start, I just want to remind you all that I'm only here to vent out my emotions, okay? So, I have opinions and thoughts and feelings to write out. They might not sound okay to you, and you may disagree, but I'm just letting you know anyway since frankly, I don't have anyone else to tell. Now, let's introduce Ashley, short for Ashley, who's my half-sister. She's around 5 years younger than me, and she's making her dad proud. Literally. Dad's delusional because this woman is out there, doing nothing but being an escort, sleeping around, with a flop online modeling career. And my father calls her his pride. Yes, you read that right. I'm guessing he doesn't know the full story. Who's going to tell him? Now, I'm not very conservative, but I try to focus on my morals and career. I court women when I find time, to try and get to know them better. Sometimes there's a spark, but other factors come into play like long distance and availability issues. Other times, there's no understanding at all. I try not to sleep with random people. I think I should wait for the right woman. Having a high body count grosses me out. I don't know why guys show it off like a medal. Disgusting. Anyway, this is what I apply to my own life. My stepsister is, sadly, the opposite in opinion. She probably has lost count of her physical partners. Then, she's an escort. Now, while that, in itself, disgusts me, there's also the fact that it's extremely dangerous too. Some guys like to do weird stuff to escorts. I don't know how anyone would think it's okay to work like that. Then, she uploads inappropriate videos and photos of herself on the internet to make money off it. She doesn't get much success there, probably because she doesn't know how to get the traffic running. But for whatever reason, it's a flop. How do I know about it? Here's an embarrassing narrative, my friend told me about it. Said Ashley texted him one time after they met for a drink and asked him if he wanted to have fun. Now, hearing the story, I got heated up a bit because the guy went out with my sister, but he said it was when he didn't know she was my sister. I don't know if he's telling the truth, but he said she sent him the link to her page, and he showed it to me too. She's always broken asking dad for money, so I think it isn't working too well for her. I couldn't bring myself to ask her about it directly, and I never told dad either. Another time, I saw her taking a call, and then sitting in a car with an elderly guy. He gave her flowers, and they drove off. She would sneak back in through the window at odd hours. I noticed this when I came home from college for the holidays. I don't know if she's still at it, though, but I don't want to be a part of any of it. I hold a respected post where I work, and I'm finally happy about it. I haven't lived much with my new family since Dad was eager to send me away any chance he got, but I've seen Ashley enough to say that she takes after her mother, Linda, F58. Linda believes she was quite the icon in her prime. She used to be a flight attendant and was fairly attractive to womanizing males like my dad. Now she's a typical botched-face Karen. She manages the neighborhood daycare of sorts. It's strange how parents would leave their kids with someone like her. She has claw-like hands with nails longer than her lipstick and pokes into everyone's business. Linda has an opinion about everything and loves to cause problems in other people's lives. She has a very bad voice and more plastic in her body than the ocean. She's as genuine as fake leather. She influences Dad for the worst and was, I believe, a major reason why my dad didn't think twice before sending me away to boarding school when I was 8. She didn't want to raise a kid that wasn't her own. Now let me tell you about my dad. He's kind of the main problem in all this, really. He thinks whatever he does in life is justified, even when it's far from it, because he's lived a whole life and so believes he knows better. He says he regrets having me because I'm nothing like him. Thank God, I'm not. My mom was a strong woman. She knew her priorities well and took good care of my dad. But they fell out. She used to tell me that Dad wasn't a bad person, just a different person, and no matter what happens, he's always going to be my dad, and I should never forget that. But she was a good soul. She didn't want to poison my thoughts against my father. I'm sure he was as unbearable to her as he is today. They separated and divorced a few months later. I was 4 years old at the time. And then 2 months after the divorce, my dad married Linda. They had Ashley when I turned 5, and then my mom died in a car crash. I can't forget it because she was coming to get me from school. She had always been on time. Just once, she was 10 minutes late. To me, it seemed like an hour, but it was 10 minutes. She got hit at an intersection by a drunk driver. He survived, but she did not. He got a DUI in a few years, and I was left alone forever. I waited in school, and it took them 2 hours to come and get me. I was lied to and confused since my dad had come. I'll never forget his annoyance when he looked over at dead-face Linda and asked what they should do about me, and she said, "Your kid, your problem." Precisely, Dad. Now you can't come and tell me I'll have to take care of your spoiled kid. I finally have a stable job and manage a few small businesses on the side. I've worked really hard since I turned 15 and have been earning a living since then. After boarding school, I went to college and only visited during the holidays. So, I've been on my own since 8. I've put in a lot of effort to get where I am and recently bought a house. It's a nice little place, much better than the shared apartment I had with my friends. It was a life goal I thought I'd never achieve. Thing is, I only just moved in last month. I may not like my family enough, but basic decency was to involve them in a moment this big. So, I invited them to the housewarming too. My dad's reaction was pretty sad to watch. He looked envious, to be honest. A little annoyed as he asked about the furniture, the architect, and the interior designer. I told him what I thought was good enough information, and he responded with taunts like, "I wouldn't know, you never bothered telling me," trying to gain attention and making our weak relationship obvious in front of friends and work colleagues, even my boss. A week passed, and I got a call from him. I was at work and had a complex project to manage. He said he wanted to meet since it was urgent, and I agreed. I went home and saw a very angry Linda and swollen, red-eyed Ashley giving me a side-eye from the living room. Dad was in the kitchen, taking out bottles of beer from the fridge. He offered me one, and I politely declined, worried about what he'd say. I asked him what he'd wanted me for, and he raised his brows and responded with another question, asking me if I'd finally started giving a damn about us. I frowned in confusion because I didn't understand what he was getting at. He asked me to join Ashley and Linda in the living room. I nodded and went over to a couch across from the two and sat down. Ashley folded her arms, and Linda rolled her eyes. Dad walked in and sat with them, facing me. He put his beer bottle on the coffee table and leaned back. He then asked me if I was blind. There was a pause, confusion on my end and anger on theirs, probably. Before I could respond, he added that it's either I'm blind or I choose not to see things that need to be seen. He said I had probably gotten very proud ever since I got a house and refused to look at the people who actually mean something to me. I sighed and asked him what he meant by all of that and requested that he be more clear. He snorted sarcastically and then told me I was unbothered by the serious situation in the room. He said that I chose not to see that the family was in jeopardy and I had decided not to offer to help. Obviously, I asked him what jeopardy he was referring to. He looked over at Ashley, who rolled her eyes and announced that she's pregnant. Like any normal person, I wanted to congratulate her. But before I could, she started crying. Linda hugged her and told me I should know what's going on at home and that I should care enough to ask. Dad said Ashley had just found out she was pregnant, and the boy responsible had broken up with her because of it. Linda added that Ashley had decided to keep the baby, and that is what we should base further decisions on. All I could manage to say was, "Can she afford it?" I got death stares from both Ashley and Linda, but honestly, I meant well. It was my concern. In my head, I had already assumed that maybe they wanted me to chip in with money to help her out. And I was genuinely ready to do that. But then Dad stood up, walked over to my side, and sat down beside me. He then said that he was a good father to his girl and maybe my mother didn't teach me how to be a good brother, but brothers would give their life away for the comfort of their sisters. I beg your pardon. I know my financial input is needed, but I'm not dying for her. I sighed and asked what he wanted me to do about it. He smiled and patted my back, saying, "That's my good boy." I gave a fake smile which got wiped off my face the moment Dad spoke his next few words, "You're giving your house to Ashley." "No, I'm not." "Yes." That's what I said immediately. Dad frowned and asked me why not. So I told him that I could help out with some cash, but the house is mine. I offered to let her stay in a room without rent until she could manage to pay for it, but Dad stood up from his seat and shouted, "Nonsense. It made perfect sense to me, Dad." But he insisted I not only give her the house but also move out and buy another for myself. I argued that Ashley couldn't even afford to pay the bills or manage the house if she was having a baby and was unemployed. And Dad told me that those would also be my responsibilities. Excuse me? Absolutely not. I was furious, but I had to remain respectful. So, I got to my feet and told him that was not possible and that I would now be leaving. Then I left. He didn't stop there. He then showed up at my house a week later while I was at work. I don't know how he got inside or where he got the keys from, but when I came home, I saw men moving boxes outside the house, boxes full of my stuff. I hurried inside, asking them what they were doing. They told me the house owner had ordered them to throw that stuff out. I shouted that I was the owner of the house and that they should get my stuff back inside and leave immediately. I lost my cool, as this was the last thing I expected to witness coming home. I went inside to find Dad and Ashley still standing there, demanding I do what brothers should do. I told them to leave, but they didn't listen. So, I told them I'd call the cops on them. That's when they finally left. They bad-mouthed me, using curses and whatnot. Now, I know this is a lot to read, but it was so much worse in person. A week has passed, and I kind of feel bad about it, which is why I'm posting here. Was I wrong? I feel like they need me and I shouldn't cut them off like this, but I also feel like there are limits to what I'm okay doing for them. It angers me how disconnected and unbothered they were about me as I grew up, but now they expect me to lay my life for them. It's a bit much, don't you think? Let me know. I can't even involve my friends in this. You all are all I have right now. Update: Hey, everyone. I hope you all are well. It's been a week since I posted, and honestly, I didn't expect it to get the attention it got. I read the comments as they came, and some made me question a lot of things. But soon enough, I decided not to cut my family off entirely. This was because I received a call from Ashley. She told me she wanted to meet me, and I accepted it. She asked to meet at my house since she wanted to tell me a few things, but I was still recovering from the scene made last time. Therefore, I insisted we meet somewhere else. We went to a coffee shop, and she was pretty uneasy at the start. Normally, she's pretty arrogant and rude, but she seemed quite unlike herself. We sat in the corner, and she told me she'd recently been broken up with. I responded, saying I had an idea since Dad said the guy who got her pregnant had left her. She shook her head and said that's what Dad thinks. I asked her what it really was, and she told me that Dad thinks her boyfriend left her because he has commitment issues, but in reality, she's the one with commitment issues. Shocking, right? She said that she really cared for this guy, but he'd found out about a few things in regards to her just a few days before she broke the pregnancy news to him. When they met, he wanted to confront her about those things, but she spoke first, and that enraged him further. He went crazy at that moment and put a hole in the wall. She said he scared her. Then he told her he was breaking up with her and left without hearing her response. She's been trying to call him constantly, and he doesn't respond at all. He only texted her back once, saying that she needs to get rid of the kid first and let him know. Only then will he speak to her at all, but she has to get rid of the kid to get that chance. Now, I know Ashley isn't a saint, but this guy? I don't like this guy at all. I only asked her what those things were that he'd found out, and she said it'd be weird to tell a brother about it. I kind of understood that she was probably referring to her online modeling and escorting. So, I shrugged and said it was okay if she didn't want to tell me. Before I could speak to ask her what she wanted to meet me for, she drew in a deep breath and let it out. Then she told me she'd been involved in shady things. I was worried as I didn't really want to hear the confirmation of all my suspicions, but I did. She told me she wanted to paint and become an artist, but Linda told her that it wouldn't fetch her a good life or money. Ashley was told that she needed to find herself a man as soon as possible. Soon enough, she started gaining the attention of elderly men, which kind of grossed her out at first. When she told Linda about it, Linda told her it was a good thing. Older men knew what to do with the money they had, and they were the ones making any money at all. Ashley was only 19 at the time, and Linda told her that college wouldn't or couldn't fetch her a good, comfortable life. Ashley had youth, and there were many who would pay for that. Ashley decided she wanted to become a model. She tried and went to many modeling agencies. None seemed interested in her. Then she met a guy in his 40s who told her he could get her a gig. He took her to parties and bought her expensive clothes and jewelry for the events. She was happy until she learned about her first gig. It turned out she was to sell her time to a man in exchange for a modeling gig. She thought it'd just be dinner, but it was a night. And she spent it. She did get a small modeling gig where she got to take photos for a small brand. But that was it. A few more men used her while she hoped for a gig in return, but she was told they didn't select her. She then found out that the guy investing in her was actually selling her. He was profiting off of her. She thought it unwise to confront him because she was afraid he'd have her killed. So, she told him she didn't want to pursue modeling anymore and was okay with minimum wage jobs. Thankfully, he let her go without an issue. She then tried to wait tables at bars, and it was pretty tough for her. That's what hard-earned cash is, Ashley, but anyway. She also said that Linda would humiliate her for choosing to do those small jobs. She told Ashley that women are the beauty of this world and should be there to shine and smile like a showpiece. They need to be taken care of and so on. So, Ashley started going out with men only for dinner, but she charged for it. She said there were many loners out there who just wanted conversation, but that, too, ended up with stalkers and obsessive men who thought they were owed more than what they'd paid for. Ashley decided that talking to men, making them feel connected, was more problematic than simply sleeping with them, so she started escorting. It worked fine until a friend told her about the online model scene. She tried to get it going but wasn't really good at handling a camera or editing things. She wasn't social enough, and it required a lot of work, so that didn't work out either. Then she met her boyfriend, who was an ex-coworker. He worked as a barista, and they met again. She liked him a lot, but he was too clingy. He was a little possessive too and didn't trust her much. Granted, he had every reason to doubt her because she was, in fact, still active as an escort and online model without his knowledge. She stopped escorting and modeling completely, and her boyfriend started taking care of her with the little money he made, and she was fine with it. Linda wasn't, though. But then she got pregnant, and her boyfriend found out everything. She said she has a few men on the list who could be potential fathers. They all chip in with money to support the kid and her. One of them had even proposed to her. But she knows all of them are doing it because they think they're the only one. Which is ridiculous since they know she's an escort, but she doesn't outrightly tell them because it pays her bills and would probably help with the kid. She said she decided to tell me all this because she couldn't tell Dad. He thinks she's only been modeling and making little money and that she had one guy in her life who left her when he should have stayed. Linda knows most of it and suggests Ashley marry the guy who proposed and let him think he's the father. But Ashley doesn't know what to tell Dad then. Also, she doesn't want to marry the guy because he's weird and old, and she doesn't want to let anyone believe a lie. I asked her what she wanted me to help with, and she said some financial input would be fine, and she wants me to make up with Dad. She said I should agree to what Dad's asking and then move out for some time. Then I could come back when matters aren't as heated. How's that a solution? I respectfully declined her offer and told her I could only contribute some cash, but I wasn't okay with moving out of my own house. She then told me I was selfish for thinking like that and that she exposed her whole life to me, yet I didn't have the decency to help her out even then. She said Dad was right about me and that I deserved to be sent to an orphanage and not taken in when I needed a place to live. She got up and stomped away. I think my response wasn't too extreme. But, is it selfish? Really? What do you think of her side of the story? Does it justify her demands? Should I trust her? I feel like she was telling the truth. But does it mean I should do what she's asking for? Let me know, y'all. Update, this thing's been picking at my brain. Another week has passed, and a few things happened. Thought I'd hit the keys and update y'all on it. Thanks for the support on my previous update, you guys. It's such a relief to have people support my thoughts for once. Anyway, after I met with Ashley, I got a call from Dad. He wanted to meet me at a bar and settle a few things. Curious, I agreed and went to meet him. We sat at the counter, and he said that he knew how much I'm earning. I asked him why it matters, and he said he knew I could afford to buy another house in a few years. I shrugged and told him I already have a house and this discussion should seriously be put to an end. He insisted that I didn't have a family yet and it's harder for women to raise a child alone. That kid needs a safe space he can call home. So I reminded Dad that Ashley has been living with them long enough, and nothing seemed to be a problem. A little baby won't hurt. I also asked him what she would do living alone in a whole house when she's pregnant. I said she needed to be surrounded by people so that she can be taken care of. That's when Dad shocked me once again. He said he and Linda would move in with Ashley, in my house. I couldn't believe my ears. Before I could react to that, the bartender let out a sarcastic chuckle. Dad took offense and asked him what was so funny. Ashley, he replied. He said she uses everyone and then throws them away. My dad asked him if he knew who he was talking about, and he nodded, saying he was her boyfriend. My eyes widened. So this was the guy. Dad balled his fists and spoke sternly to the guy, asking him why he thought it was okay to start a family he couldn't support. The guy held his hands up and told Dad that he wasn't responsible for the family in question. Also, he had no interest in raising a child that wasn't his own. Dad dared him to explain why he thought that. He smiled and told us that he had a vasectomy done last year because he didn't want any kids. But Ashley still got pregnant. Also, he found her driving off with different men after lying to him about where she'd been going. Then he found out she had an online modeling profile. Said he didn't want to believe any of it when Ashley finally told him they were having a baby. That was the last straw for him. He couldn't have a kid. So it confirmed it all. He told Ashley that she'd been cheating on him all along, and he knew, and she spilled the beans. All I could do was watch as Dad's face shifted from anger to shock to disappointment while my ears were pinned to the guy's voice. He shrugged and told us he owed Ashley nothing. In fact, she owed him money, time, sincerity, and at the very least, love. He said he didn't know if Dad knew any of it, but he was sure no dad would be proud of a kid like that. Dad tightened his lips, got off the stool without a word, and walked away. Later that evening, he texted me telling me he had to go pick Linda up from her yoga class. I don't know what went on after that, but something must have happened because the next day, I found Ashley at my door, crying. She told me I ruined everything. I pulled her inside to avoid a scene and calmed her down. I told her I didn't tell Dad anything. It was her boyfriend who happened to be the bartender where Dad and I had gone. She then told me Dad told her to quit everything and stay at home. Said he was disgusted with her and never thought she'd resort to such practices. He told her to mend her ways and find a good man, and then he also pointed out that her chances of finding good men were pretty slim now. I listened to her and hugged her. She said she was sorry for thinking it was me because Dad had just come home from meeting me when he confronted her. I forgave her, and then she went back home. While she was ranting and telling me about how pathetic she felt, she mentioned that Linda was pretty quiet when Dad was talking about good women and their loyalty. She said, like she could say anything. I asked what she meant by that, and she said that Linda couldn't have an opinion since she is yoga. I frowned in confusion before Ashley continued on with her crying as she narrated what else happened. Yoga? That stuck with me. What do y'all think really happened? Is Ashley still going to be Dad's pride? No one's contacted me ever since. I'm going to see and let y'all know, though. Update: I know y'all probably didn't expect me to get back to you so soon, but I couldn't help it. Just 2 days after my last post, and here I am. For the ones asking, Ashley's ex's name is irrelevant, but we can call him Bob. So, the day before yesterday, I went to meet Dad. I told him I'd decided a few things. I said that I wanted to help raise Ashley's kid, and I was ready to lend a room to her. I would be okay to pay for the diapers and stuff, but she needs to get a job as soon as she can. Dad told me that then there'd be no one to look after the baby. So, I suggested she try freelancing or working from home. Dad wasn't his usual rude self this time. He took a pause and then sighed. He sat down on the couch and told me he thought I hated him. He was right, but I asked him why he thought that. He said it was because Mom hated him too. I quickly told him she never said that. She always told me Dad loved me and cared about me. I told him that the only reason why I was disappointed at all was because my perception of Dad was wrong. Mom told me all that, and then what I felt from Dad was total neglect and lack of care. He rubbed his eyes and told me he hated himself for a lot of things. Said he liked Mom, but they hadn't known each other long enough to decide if they were actually each other's type. He sighed and said he got her pregnant, and that's why he had to marry her. She was a good wife to him, but he never felt the spark between them. And then he met Linda. When he said that, I could feel my insides tingling. I couldn't move. I didn't know any of this. Dad told me that Linda sparked a flame in him that he never knew he had. He was so happy with her. Then before he knew it, he caught feelings. Before he could navigate his way through rights and wrongs, he got Linda pregnant too. And then he told Linda it was wrong. But it was too late. She was pregnant. He told her to wait. He wanted to tell Mom first, but Linda felt insecure and went to our house. She told Mom everything. Mom confronted Dad, and he accepted it. It was a very ugly episode because Mom was extremely hurt. But even then, she was polite and asked Dad for a divorce. My parents divorced because Dad had an affair with my stepmom and got her pregnant. I don't know how worse this man could get. Dad took a pause and looked over at me. He said that he spent a nice year with Linda when Mom died, and he had to bring me home. Linda hated everything about it. She was, again, insecure that Dad might prioritize me over their baby somehow. Because of guilt or whatever. So, he sent me away to boarding school 3 years later. Then I never stayed home long enough to cause Linda any discomfort. Love makes you do stupid things, he said. I wanted to punch this man in the face, but I controlled it. I turned around to see Linda standing in the doorway, water bottle in hand. She said she was just leaving for the yoga class. She put the bottle on the table and went into the kitchen. I blinked, and before I could think straight, she was back and went through the door. I was numb, so I followed her out, picking up the water bottle to return it to her. When I got out, she had already gotten in her car and was driving off. I needed a drive to clear my mind, so I quietly sat in my car and drove, following her. She parked outside a yoga club and got out. She looked around herself and then started walking into an alley. She again looked around and got into another car. She hugged and kissed the driver, and they drove off. I could hardly blink. I clenched my jaw, parked, and got out. I went inside the yoga club and asked them about Linda checking in. They denied giving me personal info. I said I was worried about her and insisted they at least tell me if she was there. They said they had no client with that name. I got back to my car and waited. And I don't know what came over me, but when that other car rolled in, I started making a video. A man got out and opened her door for her, hugged her, kissed her, and slapped her butt as she joyously made her way to the parking lot. So much for yoga, Linda. Before she could get to the parking lot, I left. So, my dad cheated on my mom, and he's getting cheated on now. Karma. Dad has called me a few times, but I didn't pick up. I'm going to see what happens because all I want to do now is go and ask Linda about it all. Should I? Update, hey, y'all. This is probably going to be the last update, I think. I know it's a week late, and you all expected it sooner, but so much happened this week. First, I actually managed to man up and go and confront Linda. I went when Dad wasn't home. Ashley was asleep. I asked Linda if she had a yoga class that day. She said she had it every day, even on Sundays. She was in the kitchen, cooking pasta. I asked her who her yoga instructor was. She took a random name. I asked if that was a man, and she said no and laughed. Why would I take a guy, she said. I told her it was funny that she had a female one when the club she went to didn't have any female instructor. She told me I was mistaken, but her voice was caught off guard, and her hands stopped stirring the pasta sauce. I told her I joined the club yesterday and that's what they told me. She asked how I knew where her club was. I told her I followed her the last time I visited. She dropped her spoon. I picked it up, and she turned around. What are you getting at? She asked. So, I told her what I saw. She denied it, as expected. I said I saw it with my own eyes. She shrugged and told me Dad would never believe me. I pulled out my phone, played the video, and told her he'd believe his own eyes at least. She stood in shock and was speechless for a minute. Then her expressions calmed down, and she continued to cook pasta. She said it didn't matter anymore. She was already planning for a divorce anyway. My eyes widened. This woman was despicable. Granted, my dad deserved all of it, but man, she's a snake. She told me that the guy she goes to meet at the club is her lover of 3 years. They revived their romance when it was safe to do so. She said they'd fallen in love long ago, but at that time, he was married to another woman, whose father had hired him in his company. A lot was at stake, but Linda and her lover decided he'd choose to keep his marriage and settle his finances. Then he'd divorce his wife and get with Linda. But Linda got pregnant. So, she was desperate to pin a guy down for support, as women should. That's how she decided to keep Dad. They were seeing each other off and on, but then Linda met her lover again and got pregnant. So, she chose Dad. She told him he had to do something about it. Said he got cold feet, so she had to take matters into her own hands. That's when she spoke to Mom. Now, her lover is a widower and owns a company. She's good to go. She said, women need to do what they can, kid, and turned around with a smile. But her smile froze as she looked over my shoulder. Her smile was gone in the next moment. I turned around to find Dad in the doorway, fists balled and eyes red. He was shaking. Well then. Dad woke Ashley up and brought her to the kitchen. He asked her who her father was. She looked over at Linda and shook her head. She said she didn't care about blood because she always knew him to be her dad. He ran his fingers through his hair and paced the floor. Over the next 2 days, Linda and Ashley were told to leave his house. The divorce is in process, and they are staying at a shelter. Dad has asked me to find him a therapist, and he's apologized a lot since. I forgive him every time. As for Linda, her lover didn't take her in. He denies having any contact with her. I have the proof, and Linda has begged me for it. She's even asked me to think of Ashley and her pregnancy. What can I say, Linda? Your kid, your problem. What should I do? Delete the video, or hand it over? Thanks for being with me, for the suggestions and support. It means a lot.